Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Dance Teacher Diaries podcast. I am your host, Sarah Jean Watts. I'm a teacher, consultant, choreographer, and the founder of the Movement Mentor and Bar and Sew, which is a custom costume and apparel company that you can check out in the show notes. So let's get started with today's episode. Couple things. Actually, if you are watching a video version of this podcast, so you're watching us on YouTube or another social media platform, I know that you can see behind me there are Christmas decorations. It's January when this is being recorded. I leave my Christmas decorations up until Valentine's Day. I like them. I have a lot of them. That's just what I do. So here they are. And if you see me looking down over here, my show notes are over here on my laptop. Because if you if you listen to the trailer and episode 1, you know that I'm trying to make these shorter. And that is hard for me because I talk a lot and fast because I just have so much I want to say and so much I want to tell you, and I want to, have a nice fleshed out conversation. But I'm really trying to stick to the outline and not go on for an hour and a half in this. So hopefully this episode will be 30 minutes or less. Let's hope, right? Okay, so let's get started. Because it is January, I thought it would be a great time to talk about dance competition scoring. So that is the theme of our episode today. But it needs to be even more specific than that. So today we are going to talk about, as it's January, like I said, so people are ramping up in dance studios. The conventional dance studio world is ramping up for their competition season, the heaviest amount of competitions. They might have done some at conventions earlier in the fall or a couple sprinkled here and there, but I think the majority of studios get their competing done in these upcoming winter months as we go from winter into spring. Okay, so I wanted to talk about it now. That's item 1. Number 2, this is dance studio dance competition. So it does not necessarily pertain to all-star, to school competitions, other types of organizations like that. It's oftentimes a different season. It's a different scoring method. The competitions are run differently. And I can make other episodes. It's on my list of things to do is to make other episodes talking about that scoring, because it is certainly a different animal, but we are not talking about that one today. And the final thing I want to say about this is that I literally titled this episode, you can probably already see the title, Competition Scoring 101, Studio Dance. And I mean 101. So I can make a 102, a 103. Hey, there will probably even be a 200 level series of this. It is not the sole purpose of this podcast to do nothing but talk about dance competition scoring. But there are lots of additional episodes we can make as we dive into different subtopics on this category, different aspects of it. There's so much to be said about this, but we are literally doing a 101 today. So if you are new to the competitive dance world, or you're not new, but you've just never known much about it, hopefully by the end of this episode, you will have some idea of what is going on during the awards ceremony. Or at least when you read about, post-competition posts on Facebook and stuff like that, you'll have some idea of what's going on. Or when your dancer brings, you this collection of stuff, you're like, okay, I get what this means. Or you read the program and you're like, what is going on here? Okay, so 101 level, and I will resist the urge as best I can to expand on so many things I already know. I wrote an outline and I already know that I just want to say so much, and I got to bite my tongue in this episode. Okay, so let's scroll down here a little bit and take a look at what I'm talking about. All right, so one more quick disclaimer about this. I am delivering this podcast from the United States. I am talking about dance competitions in the United States. So if you're outside the US, this might not apply to you. And also studio competitions as examples. There's so many, right? There's so many. But let me just throw some names out. Like if you were going to Applause, Rainbow, Star Power, anything owned by Break the Floor, Nuvo, Jump, there's several companies that own actual competition conglomerates. So I don't know if you happen to know that, but like what's the example on my tongue? Oh, like Car and Rainbow are owned by the same company. They are separate competitions. They run slightly differently, but their parent entity is the same. So you'll see some crossover and similarities, stuff like that. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today. So I'm also going to be speaking in broad generalizations because every one of these competition companies can set their own rules. Again, something different than when I do an episode on All-Star, for example. That doesn't have as much wiggle room in terms of rules because there is a governing body for the most part. In these independent dance studio competitions, the one that a lot of the typical studios are going to, each company sets their own rules. There are some blanket ways of operating across all of them, so you'll find some commonalities, and that's what I'm going to speak to today. But you absolutely should go to their website and read their rules. Their rules for their competitions are always public. They're always posted online. Get an idea of what the rules are for that particular competition because they certainly vary. They absolutely vary. Okay. I'm doing good. I'm keeping it short. So far. Okay. The first topic we're going to talk about is age. So let's say you are, and if I'm speaking from the teacher's perspective, like a teacher or director or a studio admin person, whoever's entering for the dance competition versus like parents. So parents and students, you don't have much control over the entry process. Your studio takes care of that for you most likely, unless you've gone somewhere as an independent. But for the most part, you have to go online. And a long time ago, and if you're listening to the podcast, you don't see me, but I'm making air quotes about a long time ago because it isn't actually a long time ago. It's within my lifetime, and I'm not like 102. So, before we had everything online and digital and stuff like that, you would have to have either on file or with you dancers' birth certificates to validate their age if it came into question, because you would give their age and calculate, what age group your group was going to fall into and everything on your own, and you would submit that. So what is most usually the case now is you log in to register with a particular competition, your studio does, whoever's doing that, and you will, I thought there was a feed problem. We had a minor feed problem for a second there. And you will enter your dancers one by one with their birth date, and then the software will automatically calculate their age category. This is almost always the case unless you're doing like a smaller local competition, something like that. It will automatically read the birth date and then decide. Obviously, it's pretty straightforward if we're talking about a solo. But for everything else, they have their own formulas. Again, check the rules, and they do say how they calculate ages because every competition does not calculate ages the same. A lot of them are similar, but I see people like stressing sometimes over, well, she looks too old for this and she looks too young for this, and there's no way this group fell into this age category. Maybe not at the last competition you were at, but the way this one is doing things, it's all legit. You don't know that. Is it possible to lie about a dancer's age when you enter it online? Of course it is. Sure, I can do that. Now, if anybody questioned it and I didn't have the documentation to prove that, well, then there might be a risk of disqualification or something like that. But if it never got that deep, then yeah, I could get away with it. I could say, Susie was born in 2005 instead of the fact that she was born. Is that even a good age anymore? 2005 for a younger dancer? Should I say 2010? At least then they're 12. Okay. I don't know the math anymore of kids that are born in the 2000s and how old that would make them now, even though it's simple math. But right, I'm thinking like, 2005, that's young. Is it though? So anyway, I could say she was born in 2010 and really she was born in 2012, and now I get to have her compete 2 years younger. And if nobody catches me, nobody can stop me. Sure, that's possible. I don't think it happens as often as people might think. So let's all just calm down about that. Okay. But you have to enter the birth dates. The software calculates, not the computer, the software calculates what age category you're going to be in and automatically fixes that. And you cannot change that. That is based on the dancer's input. Okay. So I'm going to move on. Again, I'm trying to keep reminding myself, keep it 101, keep it short, Sarah, but that's how, obviously, solo, straightforward. And then, when you're calculating groups, sometimes it's the average. Sometimes they will do a weighted average. Some different ones have different rules about what you do when it's a 50-50 split. So there's that. One other thing I'm going to say about that also is that they can choose when they calculate age. So a very common date is January 1st. So whatever age you are at January 1st, apropos that I'm doing this episode in January, the unofficial kickoff of competition season, I guess, that's what the age you will compete at for the rest of the year. I mean, but that means that if you had your birthday on December 29th, then you are going to be, and that made you 8, and you moved into another category, right? You're going to be a really young 8, and then there's somebody that had their birthday on January 2nd, and they just made the deadline, and they are really 9 for the entire competition season, but by January 1st, they were 8. I mean, what are you going to do, right? Like, that's just the way the numbers work. They got to pick a date, there's got to be a cutoff, and that's how it all shakes out in the wash, right? So sometimes we're like, there's no way they're that age. Well, yeah, maybe 360 days ago they were, or they had their birthday, so they're at the end of the age group or whatever. So they can calculate it then. Some competitions don't use January 1st. Sometimes they use a date in the summer because it coincides better with their nationals, and that's how they want to calculate it on behalf of their own nationals, which is usually in summer. But so you gotta compete in an age category. Okay, then you have a style. Style is not automatic. So competitions will post on their website little blurbs about each style and what they consider it to be. But there's no hard and fast rules. So, and I have never experienced as a teacher or judge any competition moving a dance to a different style. Like they didn't look at it and go, you know what though, that wasn't hip hop and it really should have been an open, so we're going to move you. I've never seen anything moved but for style. And that, of course, is another thing about competitions that is subjective and relative. So, for the region that you're coming from or from the studio that you're in or from the background of the people entering you, and, that who decides what's going to be what. And that, I want to move on, but that can certainly affect score. And keep in mind, just quick tip. I'm gonna kind of throw in a couple tips just to calm people down because I see and I have experienced people getting a little worked up from their own perspective, and I get it, but if they have a little bit more information, that might calm them down or avoid kind of getting a negative attitude about it at all, even if it's unintentional or unintentionally negative. Like you might, I might have 2 groups, and I have a jazz number, and then I have a lyrical number. At least I'm entering. I'm entering like 2 small groups that are in the teen category. And I've got 1 in jazz and I've got 1 in lyrical. And from another person might look at that and go, that jazz really doesn't belong there. That looks like a lyrical number. But you don't know that I have another lyrical number that is very lyrical, and I don't want my 2 groups to go against each other. And whether or not you think that people should, alter registration to keep teams from their own studio from going against each other is a separate topic. Separate opinion, separate day, but right, it's relative to what someone interprets any given style to be, and on top of that, to what else I brought to the competition that day from my studio or from my dancer. So, maybe you think my jazz looks really lyrical, but if you saw my other number, you would be like, oh yeah, that's super lyrical, So just keep that in mind. Okay. Group size. So you will also have to enter, now obviously a solo is a solo, that's 1 person. There's duos and trios, so a duet is 2, a trio is 3. Some competitions will put duos and trios together against each other, and some will keep them separate. And then there's groups after that of various different, so the number of people usually will affect what you can enter in group size after that. So the most common thing in the past has been small group, large group, line, and production, I think are the ones I see most across the board. And that, a small group might be 4 to 9 or 4 to 10, and then a large group like 10 to 15, and then a line 15 or 16 plus. And then sometimes I see production as 20 plus regardless, and sometimes the number requirement for a production is the same as a line. It's just that they have different requirements of a production. And so like going back to what I said about style being like based on the competition, kind of read through their rules and see what they're calling jazz, what they think should be in the open category, what they, what are they separating tap and clogging? Do they have a clogging category? Maybe we should put an open. Anyways, sometimes a competition production means a bunch of dancers. Sometimes it means a bunch of dancers and props and a bunch of entrances, exits, storylines, stuff like that. So, right, you got to read the rules. But you will split dancers by age, by style, by group size. Okay. Then we will also split dancers by level. Not all competitions do levels. A lot of them don't. You come as you are. We separate you by your age, sometimes your style, by group size, of course, but we're not going to separate novice, intermediate, advanced, or whatever they want to call it. Everybody's just going to be in the same pool, and the scores fall how they fall. Okay, so then you won't see levels. If you do see levels, they could be named anything they want. They might be named, as I said, with the novice, intermediate, advanced, or elite, or pre-pro. Some name their levels branded, so like, unique names to their competition, something like that. So look online or in their program and see what those names mean, and so that like if you brought a dancer to competition and she is in the intermediate level, look up what the name of the intermediate level is. That means that most likely, I would say 99% of the time, if it's a competition with levels, your intermediate dancer will not ever compete against a group in novice or a group in advanced. Not the dancers though, and that's part 102 or something like that. But because you might have an intermediate soloist and advanced soloist, and once you put them in their groups, separate groups, they end up head to head. But I don't want to confuse anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about by getting onto that. But so anyway, there will be different levels. Without going too much into levels, another quick tip, just want to throw this out there. This is just as subjective and relative as anything else. There are competitions that will put out guidelines and say, for us, novice looks like these skills, intermediate looks like these skills, advanced looks like these skills. Sometimes they'll say it's number of years in dance or experience competing. Sometimes they'll throw out a guideline that says the amount of hours per week you take. So maybe we recommend you be a novice if you take 2 hours or less of dance per week. And if you take between 2 and 6, we recommend you go to the intermediate category. And if you take 6 and up, we go to advanced. These are common numbers, but they're not the only numbers. Okay. So that might be out there, as general competition guidelines. But just think about how difficult that would ever be to enforce. And again, how relative that is to anybody's given environment, region, experience. Like I said about age, can I lie? As if I was as a director entering, can I lie? Of course I can. It's going to be hard to stop me, where I could have like a girl who takes like 8 hours a week and I can put her in intermediate. Well, here's the thing. Let me go back on that a second. I can, if I was actually actively lying with malicious intent, I would say, oh, well, she's advanced, but I really want her to win the overall and get first place. So I'm going to purposely put her in intermediate to dance down so that she gets a win. Okay? That is immoral to me, but it's hard to prove. And I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you nobody ever does it. I'm sure people do it. But I think it happens less than people think. And I see, sometimes even teachers and parents and dancers who get caught up in all the going off the chain about this sometimes. And I think that's happening way less than we think. The more likely scenario is that based on what's coming out of that studio, that's what they think they are. So you might be watching the intermediate soloist and see a girl that comes on and you're like, okay, that girl has no business being an intermediate. She is absolutely advanced. But maybe out of the 7 other girls that they brought, 7's such a conservative number nowadays for solos at studios, but maybe they brought 20 soloists, and that the level of dance at that studio is so high, is towards elite and pre-pro, that she actually is one of their more intermediate dancers by the standard of dance they have at that studio, or the level or the amount of hours those girls are training or whatever. So in terms of, imagine you were the director at that studio, or you were a parent at that studio, and you had your daughter who was actually, one of the lower soloists in skill level, and the studio was like, well, she's got to go against our best. You wouldn't think that's fair, right? And I have literally encountered this where parents, are not thinking. I know they want the best for their kid. I said on this podcast we would keep it real, right? So I know that they're coming from a place of good intention. They want the best for their kid, and they want a fair shot for them. But you have to think about perspectives other than just yours, and some other parent at some other studio who is going through a similar thing, right? So levels are subjective and relative. That is a very difficult thing to enforce, and we all just do the best we can with it. And just know, if you see something that seems a little off, it might be that they entered they entered them lower for an easier win. It might be, or it might just be that really based on what else they have, that's where they thought they should be. All right, enough about that. Adjudication. This is the part of the award ceremony that everyone loves, where they read every single routine. And they do it to give everybody a moment of recognition, right? But if you are like sick of super multi-hour long award ceremonies, then you're probably like, oh, this part. I think COVID gave us a break from that for a little bit. But I think it's going to end up, or most everybody's back to the normal long reads. So this is where they go and they read each entry one by one, and they give it this is what I call a color score. It's an adjudication award, but I say color score to make it so that people know what I'm talking about, because the most common thing is like the high silver, gold, high gold, platinum, or elite high gold, platinum, or double platinum, or whatever they want to come up with, some type of medal with a D and medal with a T. And sometimes it's not that, there's competitions that use like rhinestone names, or gemstones, like ruby and diamond and stuff like that. And there are some that, like, what does CAR use? First, top first, and elite top first. So they all have first in the name. Anyway, they can make up whatever names they want for it. But basically it means they took the number of points that you got, put it against like a scale, and said, okay, if you got between 200 and 250, you're getting high gold. And if you scored between 250 and 275, you're getting elite high gold. And that is usually either posted on their website, in their program book, something like that. There are a few competitions I know of that don't have it online. I think that's annoying, but you should be able to get a copy at the actual event if it's really that important to you to find out what the exact numbers are. But anyway, that's the adjudication award, and it's just based on how many points you got against that particular competition's scale that they have set up with their different names. Okay. Then, what did I write here? Just a little bit about this adjudication award, and I want to be careful not to dive in too much. But just know, here's another one of these little tips. Or something to consider. It's not even a tip. It's just something to consider. As a judge, we don't know, based on the competition, the judging panel, any given specific judge, the type of judges the competition usually hires, anything like that. Sometimes we're judging, or a person is judging, based on an internal standard that is fixed, and sometimes that internal standard is being adjusted for what they're watching. Now, if that makes no sense to you, I'll give an example. Like, I may be the type of judge who says, let's use 1 to 10. 10 is perfect technique to me. And a dancer comes on stage, and they are in the novice category, and their technique for novice is great. Like, what I would expect out of a novice dancer, fantastic job. I want to give that a 9. Because for novice, I think the technique level was 9. There also might be a judge who goes, I score on a fixed scale to keep it consistent, and 10 is my perfect technique out of all the ways that technique can be executed, right? So whether you're novice, intermediate, advanced, that doesn't matter to me. You might have done a good job, but on technique, I can only give you a 2 because 10 is perfect technique to me, right? So, I mean, competitions have sometimes have measures, like their actual admin staff have measures to try to do that, or they judge, they give directives to their judges, but ultimately, that's something going on inside a judge's brain, and I just think you should keep that in mind and not get too hung up on number scores, especially when we're talking about categories below the most advanced category they have. Okay. Placement or rank within category. Okay. Categories are usually not the overalls. So let's say you have a dancer in the junior age category, or like a group. It doesn't matter, either way. Junior age category, intermediate level, jazz. That's what their group competed in, okay? So they're all like 8 to 11, okay? As they give those adjudicated awards, they often do it at the same time. They might announce who won the category. This is not the same as overall. This means that out of the other juniors, age 8 to 11, that danced in the intermediate level, that competed in the jazz category, they had the highest number of points, whoever they announced as first in category. Okay. So again, not overall, not against all juniors, not against all intermediates, just the juniors that danced intermediate jazz that day I forgot one part, the group size, in small group. Because it's not going to be against the intermediate junior jazz productions, right? We don't put those together. We don't do apples and oranges. So out of that group, you had the highest score for jazz. That is what it means to win your category most of the time. Again, some competitions don't have levels, so that you can factor that out, and maybe it's just all the 8 to 11-year-old jazz groups, that were like small groups that day, then they got the highest. Okay. Hopefully this is making sense, or maybe you have to listen to it twice. Maybe I should make a worksheet. Nah, you can figure it out, right? Let me know. If you want me to make something written, let me know. Okay. Like a tree or a tier structure or something like that. But okay. Overalls. So when I'm saying category is not the same as overalls, what do I mean by overalls? Overalls is simply when they take away the style. And now it's just everybody, regardless of whether it was jazz, hip hop, open, lyrical, contemporary, whatever the style was. Okay, that's what it means to win your overall. It's still separated by age. It's still separated by level, and it is still separated by the size of the group. It's just now it doesn't matter what style of dance you did. We are going to take the highest number of points and give that first overall, second, third, and on down the line. And they may not announce a bunch of overalls if there weren't that many people in the category. So if there were only 5 in the category, they might only announce first or first and second. If there were 50, they might decide to do a top 25. Depends on the competition. And that's something, here we go, to keep in mind. Usually when people post overalls, they often don't post how many others they were against. Feel about that as you will. That's a separate episode when we talk about posting our dance results, but because I don't want to dive too much into that. Too much to say about it, but know that's common, and it's not always meant in a negative way. It's just usually we say 5th overall, but you don't know if that was 5th overall out of 50 or 5th overall out of 6. And sometimes you'll get 1st overall, but out of 1. And certainly when you get to the larger groups, that's more likely, right? Like when you get to lines, maybe only 1 novice line showed up that day in the mini category. So they're going to get 1st, of course, right? They were against themselves. So That's what it means to win your overall. Okay. Then they have special awards. I actually am not even going to talk about special awards in this episode because I think that needs more time as well. But they will give special awards. Oftentimes they have like cute names, or that's the little pamphlets that you get that talk about, opportunities to dance here, there, or wherever. So aside from those adjudicated or color awards, the medaling and the overalls, there will also almost always be special awards. That give recognition to certain routines or certain dancers. Okay. All right. We are about at wrap it up time. I think I did pretty good on time. I have no idea what it is. I have absolutely no counter or clock up, but I hope that I did a good job on time with this one. Summing everything back up for me. When you at competition, you're trying to figure it out. When you see someone talk about what their competition results are, let me summarize for you things to keep in mind and consider. Level. Many competitions have multiple levels. Whether somebody says it or not, they may have competed in novice, intermediate, advanced, elite, pre-pro, adult, teacher, who knows, okay? Not that many people compete in adult teacher, but okay. Number of attendees. You have no idea how many people came to that competition. There might have been 1,000 entries. There might be 500 entries. Actually, let me go backwards for a second and back to what I my main point in doing this summary. It isn't just literally to summarize what I already said. I certainly don't mean by explaining all of this to take away from the weight of accomplishment. If a dancer does well at a competition, let's celebrate that. Of course. Winning is not bad. It feels good to win. I know that. I like when my kids are, when they win something. I like when they get recognized. I like when they get special awards. I like when they get overalls. I like when they get first overall. I like when they win nationals. Of course I do, right? Like winning is fun. And I don't want to minimize that or take that away. But the math is that more people will not win than win. So, if somebody got first and everybody else didn't. So I actually encounter more often people's emotions and opinions in regards to not winning. And I watch that sometimes snowball and storm into things I wish it didn't. So as I kind of do the summary, that's where I'm coming from. Going, here's the thing. We got to put it in perspective. We got to step back. We got to not take the scoring aspect of competition so seriously and literally and make that the end all be all, or even one of the biggest factors, to be quite honest, because there are so many variables. It is subjective, it is relative, and there's, I haven't even touched on them all or elaborated on them, and you can tell how many factors go into figuring out how any of this plays out by the time you list the names in order, right? So, hopefully this will help people not only understand what's going on, but think a little bit differently about how they process competition results in general. Okay, so level. Let me just go back through it super quick. With that in mind, level matters if that competition had levels. Okay, keep that in mind. The number of people that attended. So now that seems more obvious, right? That's more connected. If you had a lot of people attend a competition, you may not get as high in the overalls or as high of scores as you liked, but you are against so many more people and potentially so many more really good people. It doesn't make you bad, right? It's just, you might be, let me give you an example. I live in a Milwaukee suburb, and that doesn't mean that there aren't amazing dancers in Milwaukee. That's not what I'm getting at. There are. And anybody can travel anywhere to compete. But you will more likely find much steeper competition in Chicago, an hour from here, than you will in Milwaukee. Even though Milwaukee is a big metropolitan area, it's nothing compared to Chicago. And places like Chicago, LA, New York, or like these, there's places in Florida, like dance meccas. There's professional companies. There's a lot, studios are really traveling there to go against the best of the best. So you're going to run into a much higher level of dancing, more people in that advanced, elite, pre-pro, there we go, category. So that's something to keep in mind too. Not only how big the competition was and how many people even showed up, but how elite or advanced the people who did show up were. And in that case, you got to look at it and go, okay, well, no, we didn't get first overall, right? Like maybe last weekend we got first overall, but we went against 3 people. And this week we got 10th overall, but we went against 50. Or not even that. What if you got 10th overall and you went against 11, but the 9 that placed above you were incredible teams, right? So that stuff matters. It should factor into what you take away from what happened during the competition weekend. Okay. Category versus overall. Just remember, you can say that you won your category. It's not the same as winning your overall. It doesn't mean category doesn't matter. It's a different kind of win. It doesn't, it's something to be the best of the best in the jazz they saw that day, for your age and your level and your size group. Okay. The style that you chose or that they chose or whoever chose, sometimes I don't want to go too much into like the differences in styles and the whole lyrical contemporary modern debate. That's again something for another time. But you can have an easier shot at winning your category if you go in musical theater versus jazz, for example. I'm not saying you do that. Only do musical theater if you really think it fits for the dancer or it fits for you or it's something that you've always wanted to try. But like, could you have a better chance at winning your category in musical theater than jazz? Of course, because way less people enter that. So, you might get first out of 5 category musical theater because, and then the jazz category's got like 15 solos in it or 25 solos. Or if you're a little bit more seasoned, you know that you can go to a competition and sit there and go, there are 88 senior contemporary solos today. Right? You can't see this on the podcast, but I just did a mind-blowing thing. Right? We all know that feeling. Like, oh boy, it's going to be a long couple hours, right? So your category might influence your score. I shouldn't say score. Placement. Category might influence placement. Or your style. Okay. Two more things. What particular words and titles mean for any given competition. Platinum is sometimes the highest. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's double platinum. Sometimes there's something above double platinum. Some competitions don't use platinum at all. So, we can get all bent out of shape over what color or what medal or what adjudication award we got. And it really isn't that important. Or it varies between competitions. So, you feel like if you had no idea that competition A topped out at platinum and competition B topped out at double platinum, and you're thinking like, oh, well, double or platinum isn't as good as double platinum. Well, who knows? Okay. They all make up their own names. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is point differential. And to be honest, and I definitely know I'm going to have to make separate episodes about this, and talking about some of my own personal philosophy about dance competitions and what your takeaways should be or what my opinion is on those. Point differential is probably the most key thing to me. And if I had to pick if you were like, pick one thing that matters, that's the thing that I would pick in terms of scoring. Because there are plenty of things about competing, plenty of benefits and things about competing that have nothing to do with scores, placements, or overalls. But if someone said pick one thing that matters in scoring, I would pick point differential. What I mean by that is the space between points. So super quick, to wrap it up, we'll see how long I sit on this. Sometimes we're talking about tenths of a point difference. And, as judges, if you really think like as an audience member, as a teacher, as a judge, do you really sit there and think that there is a noticeable difference between 85.6 and 85.7? There's no way. Someone can argue with me. By all means, you are welcome to disagree with my opinion about that 6 and 7. But and that's, again, I want to control my tangents here. Something I dislike about competition scoring is how big the point range is and then how small we bring this down. And especially in dance studio competitions where we don't have like technical deductions and stuff like that, you'll encounter in some other styles of competition where you might lose 1/10 of a point because of being out of bounds or something like that. That doesn't generally happen in the dance studio competitions outside of like major infractions. So having things down to 1/10 of a point, sometimes you're like, I have seen kids just, having a mini mental breakdown because they got, I don't even know. Like if you're listening to this and you've been one of my dancers and you're like, she's talking about me. No, I'm not. I can't even remember enough to say that I'm talking about you. Chill. But just off the top of my head, like you got, instead of getting platinum, you got high gold. And you really, really wanted platinum. You could be 2/10 of a point away or 1/10 of a, that's like nothing. Or, you scored above this person last weekend, but you didn't this weekend, or, you're trying to crack into that overall, or, I've seen parents in the audience be like, my kid was definitely better than that. Like, come on. 1, let's not be like that. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, they could be 1/10 of a point apart, and that is not really distinguishable. I'm just going to be honest about it. It's not. So, keep that in mind. Sometimes even, I'm not even going to say 1/10 of a point. An 85 versus an 86, there might be a slight bit of difference. I also might have judged those things an hour apart. If you would let me see all the solos, back to back to back, and then let me rank them and score them afterwards, it might have a little bit more weight. But in the studio world, some competitions do that. But in the general normal dance studio competition world, we don't get to do that as judges. You don't get to see them all and then make your final decisions based on the big picture. You just got to score it in the moment and move on, and score it in the moment and move on. And, one walks off and the next one walks on, and we have got to keep moving. And, we got to score fast. So what's my point? Point differential. The bigger the differential, the more indication it should be to you that there was a significant difference that the judges could see. It doesn't mean it's the only thing that matters. I'm just throwing that out there as probably one of the the key differentiators, again, in my opinion. If there is a 10-point difference, it is very likely that was a noticeable difference, and, whether it's a solo or a group or anything like that. So if you're going to pay attention to anything, I would say that. But again, that doesn't mean that all the other things I talked about don't apply. Age, group, level, who showed up, how many people showed up, what style you chose. All that stuff still applies. Okay. So that is it. That's the last thing that I had to talk about in this episode. Hopefully, if you know nothing about dance competitions or very little, this helped you sort some of that out. This of, like I said, 101 level scoring for dance studio competitions. If you have any questions about this, if you have comments, if you have questions, if you would like me to elaborate on any one of these topics, so you're thinking like, hopefully she'll do an episode on this part of scoring, then, hopefully I will, but it would be much more likely if you would actually tell me about it. So you can leave a comment, or you can DM us on Instagram at The Movement Mentor or at Dance Teacher Diaries, on Facebook at The Movement Mentor Official. You can go on our website and use the Contact Us page, and all of this will either be in like the description box on YouTube or in the show notes, and you can find those links and that information. You don't have to like memorize it right now. Just go there, send us messages, send us requests, let me know what your questions are so that I can compile them and get those answered for you. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to this podcast. I will see you in the next episode, and remember, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. Bye.